Oh, it's being recorded. Welcome. We're working on chapter 12. This may be the last session of this study group, though I know Karen Snyder is hoping it'll go longer because this is her personal best record for the longest study she's ever been in. She really wants to get a reward for that. Anyway, Karen nicely provided us with some notes from chapter 12, so we can spend the next 20 minutes or so kind of talking about the key points and insights from this chapter. If you follow the link I put in the chat, it takes you to a document that has more links, including the link to Karen's work and Sharon's work and some other things we'll get to later. And I added Ruth's suggestion into that third section about making up something else we should work on. Okay, so let's look at.
Whoops.
You want to talk a little bit about your experience reading the chapter, and then maybe just, what were the key points and where did it address you and how can we use this information?
Karen, you said, right?
I did say Karen. I guess she dozed off, but
yeah.
I'm sorry I missed that. I mean, missed the question. I'm sitting here thinking about. Overall. I'm doing a lot of thinking about how to do storytelling. This whole chapter seemed like it mentioned that, and now I'm looking at these notes and I'm saying, where does it say storytelling? Save your seeds of story and memory. You'll need them to tell a new story. Anyway, storytelling to me is I keep saying to myself, it's our new technology of participation. It's different than doing presentations.
Yes.
Another technology we had, but storytelling. Was that your question?
yes, yeah,
That works.
sure. Somebody else, what were the key points in this chapter that he makes?
I think are you open it to anybody?
Yes.
I am.
I think for me, one of the key things he was saying was if you work in these rural small town communities, remember that they have a lot, they're very serious about the past. And the memories.
Names.
That's one point he made through that. I mean, in a good way. And I mean, he was positive about that. That can go bad, of course, but yeah, it was these folks think that the things that happened in the past, and they're probably right, are very important to them and to their community. So that was one point.
How to use those, build on those without getting stuck in them,
Right.
or victimized by them.
If we are sensitive to that issue, that certainly points to our national conversation that we're trying to have about who we are as a people, because there are many people who are sitting eyes backward because that's where values and meaning exist for them.
Yep.
I found the whole, he always begins with his personal story in every chapter. And the beginning of this chapter was really a long piece about leftovers. And I love that. He drilled down about what it is about leftovers. And there's 3 points, and it's about inclusion and diversity and
Spirit.
being mindful and keeping, being so intentional. And spirit is in there, but I just love that.
What were the 3 gifts of leftovers?
Practical, missional, and spiritual. Practical is you have it.
Prolong the pleasure of a good meal.
Yeah.
Leftovers ease the effort. and leftovers evoke memories.
I was struck in that next section where he kind of lays out memory with his suggestion that your images of the future are based on what you have experienced. And if you haven't experienced something, you can't imagine the future. So he kind of pushed the business of the function of your memory in being able to perceive what's going on or being able to see into the future. That caught my attention.
I
Right.
was caught by the memory pitfalls when he talked about icons to idols,
Yeah.
selective memory, and nostalgia. And I found myself thinking about different groups that I have participated in now or have participated in, and kind of tried to figure out which pitfall or all three did that group in which I participated kind of fall into. That was helpful to me as a screen for observing and thinking about pitfalls.
I wanted to add that our memories are woven together deeply into who we are, which is why we needed to have the Global Order Council, so we could literally hear from all of us all over the world. That's why we had the Global Order Report every week. But more importantly, it was a way of creating a people. Now, if you go back to an earlier time, and I'm 82 years old, I grew up with a maternal grandfather and without television. Television didn't really exist until I was about 10. So I would go with my grandfather down to the country store, and he would chew tobacco and spit into the fire, or gather around the pot-bellied stove and tell stories. And everybody in his little group, all of whom were male, by the way, participated in this storytelling that created who they were as a community. And these were the old guys in the community who had the memory and who created a sense of connection. And I grew up with that. And I kind of assumed that would be the way we continued to create community. We're right now in a time of post-community and fragmented memories or lack of memories. And some of us don't have the benefit of knowing who we are because of where we came from as individuals. And within that, how we create community together that is beyond who we came to be as individuals. I don't know if that helps, but
That's great.
pretty much what I wanted to say. And I didn't even get to read most of the chapter.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you came to it or not yet, but I love the story of the high school kids from the what was it, the Farmers Association or something, that they cleaning up the tombstones
Yes.
in their
Yeah,
community. I thought that was such a great project for the teenagers to do, for the teacher to think of. And I guess it was during COVID, so they were the kids were kind of isolated, but it was done outside, so it was really appropriate. But in addition, the kids learned so much about individuals that came before them. And so it was a link for them to create that kind of community, I think.
Collective memory can also be controlled. and I have concerns about that.
Hmm.
You know, for example, my parents are both immigrants. They understood at a deep level that their memories of their culture, and their experience were not going to be acceptable memories in this culture.
Hmm.
And they said to me very directly, forget about these memories. We're not even going to talk about them. You have a job to do. Your memories are about this culture. Engage the memories of this culture. Understand the memories of this culture. Now, the memories of this culture are steeped in white superiority and a mythology of exceptionalism that I find heavily problematic.
Good.
Repulsive.
So and we struggle today about who's going to hold the collective memory.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the pitfalls, isn't it? Selective memory, as opposed to the whole story. That was one of the pitfalls of memory. But I just very quickly, I wanted to add on the top of page 252, he talks about ordinary leaders keep alive the respect for the dignity of every life as part of the story we're telling together. That's the ancestors. He talks about the ancestors, you might remember that. But this last sentence, then, in the project of recovering abundance, we need storytellers and memory keepers who work to uncover all our stories and histories. I thought that was a great sentence. We need those people in our communities that can do that.
Yeah.
That's a key, to me, it was a key point.
I kept reflecting on this in terms of what, some of the things that Thomas Berry has said, that probably all our stories are selective and they're too narrow. And so he goes back, okay, what is the Earth story? What is the universe story? What is it that is going to tie us together? When we were at the Institute, we talk about the new religious mode would birth a new social vehicle. A new religious mode, in one sense, was part of the new story. But even that's going to be too narrow. What is the Earth story that's going to hold us all together in community? What is the new Earth? What is the new community that we're all part of, no matter what race, religion, or, gender, whatever that we are? And how do we build on that? The memories that are part of that Earth story in the 13.8 billion years, and how do we move into that in the future to create something that's new, that's built on what is sustainable?
I'm finding that this dynamic of reflecting that you don't know your experience until you have reflected upon it is really paramount and so important, because we're in a time where people don't even remember what happened this morning or last night or so the practice, and especially together in a group, of remembering and telling, just even asking what are those things that happened. Even with my grandchildren, I'd rather have them remember what happened in their class and at school than the video game they just played, So there's something about the rehearsal of that and the practice and knowing and doing it over and over to have it be a strong muscle, if you will, that I think will help us.
There's so many organizations where there's no room for it. There's no way to wiggle in a reflection on a group as it's moving forward, or as it's a tricky.
Then I won't be a leader there.
Well, even as a participant, to figure out how to allow a group to do that is kind of the second teacher back of the.
Yeah, give me an example. I mean, it was not a part of our church council meetings or anything else until you know, I introduced it and made it be a pillar of how we have a meeting happen. Yeah, you have to get it inserted.
I was struck by the sentence at the end, just before the multiplying the miracle. Ordinary leaders are open to God's new words and works, so they
Yeah.
don't run away when God breaks the script with a strategic surprise. And ordinary leaders learn to tell the new story in word and deed.
Yep.
That memory, how do I say this? The phenomenon being pointed to with the word God is an ongoing thing that happens and happens and happens. And the story I learned when I was a young adult was a great, powerful, and struggle-filled story. And the story I'm having to remember now, about half of that's not important. Not so much because somehow it was wrong, and my story's not going to be wrong,
Bigger story.
but it just didn't fit what was happening in life. It didn't fit, if you use theological language, God's ongoing footsteps. He was doing something different. That for me is I was riding in a car with 3 grandsons, and they were talking about cars. And I thought, why talk about cars? You know, we got to get rid of fossil fuels. But the more I listened to it, they were having a conversation about what are cars going to be like on into the future. And it was they were very carefully trying to remember something that would carry them into the future about life and stuff that was going on, not just bemoaning how terrible things were.
Mhm.
It's kind of caught my attention. What's important about this chapter? What's to hold on to? Why is this practice of memory worth having? What is it? What is it pushing us to do? Where is it addressing us?
One of the things they emphasize in this chapter is without memory, you can't envision possibility. It's out of our memories that we create the possibility and the future.
I think the chapter is calling us to look at, as we are in this meeting or that group or this other organization, what memory is being shared here? What, to be discerning, to use one of his other practices, to figure out, to be asking the question of what is the memory that's being told here? Is it icon or idol? Is it selective? Is it nostalgia? Where is the future memory? What's his phrase? Future, present, future, whatever it was.
Remembering the future.
Yeah, where is that going on? That's a helpful screen for every group that I participate in.
It strikes me that when you're paying attention and listening to memory and employing it in your group, you have the possibility. And the image of sewing came to my mind, even, by hand. You make a stitch, you make another stitch, make another stitch, and then you get to the end and you tie it off and pull it together. That makes it a memory to me, or that kind of, I don't know, it came to me.
When you said sow, I thought you meant sow as in seeds, because he did talk about that.
Oh, no, I meant sew
Both
like
of them are-
in mend.
Both of
Mending.
them, yeah.
Sew like in sew, yeah.
That section on planting and preserving seeds made it clear.
Yes.
Holding on to what we know about the past so it can be available for the future is complicated.
Yes.
Well, just look at our technology. you know, we started with great big huge discs, and then we had floppy disks, and then we had smaller discs, and then we had VHS, and then, you know, it's just our memories are disappearing with the technology that we use or don't have access to anymore.
Well, what about the last section, the growing edge? That seemed like almost he was
Yeah.
trying to do a conclusion to the whole book.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What was the point of that? Wendell, was it Wendell Berry he quoted?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
No, Howard Thurman.
Howard
Howard
Thurman.
Thurman.
Look,
He wanted
It has to do with birth and death. He's emphasizing the redemptive aspect of our stories, and you know, there is a life cycle, and in that life cycle, death is a part of it, and birth is a part of it, and they go together. And
Gonna make announcement about that.
look well to the growing edge. We need you, so don't get stuck or stagnant. Don't forget to breathe and push, because we are in the midst of a long labor of renewal. Eat up and gather the leftovers. We've got a long but rewarding journey ahead. Save your seeds of story and memory. You'll need them to tell a new story.
Mhm.
A seed is something very interesting to consider, as is our own genetic code, insofar as the seed contains the entire memory of that being's reality. But without, and that entire memory, as it were, is the platform for new creation and new reality.
Mhm.
So
Was
you
it
have the
in-
entirety of your history and your memory, and you have the potential for creating new reality because of it.
Yeah.
Well said.
Well, and one of the key things there is the entirety.
Mhm.
That in that genetic code is the entirety, not just what you want to talk about,
Mhm.
but the entirety. And so the gift of that is if I open myself up to that entirety, more and more of it is revealed. And more different choices are revealed, because I'm not limited to just the piece of the genetic code I decided to accept. I have access to the whole thing.
Mhm.
I'm complete.
And that code connects us to every living thing and every piece of our reality.
And we don't know it all. It's there.
No.
We don't know it all. And it's always being uncovered and discovered. The section on multiplying the miracles, it seemed like what he was saying there was like if the disciples had not remembered what Jesus did and said, we wouldn't be here.
That's right.
And so it's not just a matter of the memory, it's the memory that then forms a people, forms like Martine's earlier example. You know, he probably should have been traumatized and gotten therapy for all those big people standing around him and staring at him when he was filled with guilt and every other thing. And that kind of experience could have gone wrong, but it also formed him and impelled him into who he is today. And to the degree any of us forget, not only individually, but forget collectively that this happened, that people came together and marched on Montgomery, that people came together and they sat down on a bus, that
Yeah.
police dogs were leashed on people, that 6 million Jews were, that these are all memories that impel us to be different people, to be the kind of people that are needed into the future, not just ones that are old. I'm struggling with that a lot.
My dad-
My grandkids now are trying to help me. Can I help you up, Grandpa? Here, let me take you. I'll walk down the stairs in front of you, and I don't want to have it happen.
Yeah.
Leave me alone.
I'll kick you.
My dad told me a story about Rosa Parks. We were talking about Rosa Parks, and he told me a story. He said, when I first heard Rosa Parks' story, I was on the bus with her, but I was one of the people that didn't allow her to sit down.
Wow.
Mhm.
And he said that's one of the, because when he was in high school in New Orleans, the colored only sign was in the bus, and he and the boys in his high school would take the bus and take the sign and push it all the way to the back of the bus so nobody could sit down. And as a white kid, you had that power, but anybody else could not put it back except the driver. And so anyway, that was his memory of the Rosa Parks incident.
Yeah.
Couple of years ago, we heard, well, in about 2015, 2016, my family was contacted by the German government. 12 of my family members were killed in the Holocaust, and 12 were involved in the expulsion of Prussian or Polish people with that ancestry from Berlin in October of 1938. They wanted to see if our family would like to participate in an exhibit that they were going to be doing, where they would be recalling the stories of 40 families. And that they would assign us 2 doctoral students who would be in touch with us, but who would do the research about our family in Berlin. And then a book would be written with their story. And they had chosen my family because my family were quite a few of them were actors and were engaged in the dramatic scene in Berlin at that time. My grandfather was a friend of Bertolt Brecht, and so they were involved in that scene. But 12, I don't know if you're familiar with Stolpersteine, which are the brass plaques that are placed at a place where the Nazis came and took a family, and then the names of those persons and their story are maintained. Well, 12 of those would be placed for my family, and they said, we want you to come, you and the family come for both this exhibit and the placing of these stones.
Wow.
And so this was in 2 separate places in Berlin, 2 separate sites, 5 stones in one place and 7 stones in another. And these were all family members. We gathered with family, and then we were there for the actual placing of these stones. The interesting thing was that in both places, all of the neighbors in the immediate block came together and had a party for us, where they all came, brought food, set up a place where we could all gather. And these were German citizens. Some may have been Jewish, maybe, but most were not. And I'm talking about, in both places, over 100 people coming to gather around the family, and then to mark they marked in chalk throughout the community the name of our family on their doors. And like my name, my family was Marori, and what was marked on all the doors was Marori lebt.
What does that mean?
Marori, the family lives.
Ah,
But
no.
I mean, of course, they were very specifically remembering the act of genocide, and everyone participated in that and understood it and remembered it. But at the same time, they came together to celebrate. We're remembering this. We're going to change. We'll never let this happen again. And we gather around your family and care for your family. It was it was just a beautiful opportunity.
Yeah, wow.
To be in the midst of, and then our like my grandchild was able to place the stones. They had the grandchildren come and actually put the stones in the ground.
Wow.
For each of the family members. So, so here's a nation that's made a commitment to remembering this horrendous, history, and trying to come from that history to create something new. And so, it's again kind of like what we hear about in this chapter.
Yeah. Wow.
I wanted to try to get you all riled up just a little bit by talking about my personal experience of the destruction of memory, not the use of memory or the creation of memory, but its destruction. And the way it's getting destroyed in our culture is that people in my age group who in a traditionally cultural setting would be the wise ones, we are being marginalized. And the more I see that going on, the more disturbed I am. And the strange way we're getting marginalized is people want to put us on the equivalent of a cruise ship without ocean. Feed us well until we die, give us things to play with, but take away our relevance and take away the political discussion that we could be participating in. Oh, we'll all be nice to each other. We'll be well-heeled middle-class people enjoying the end of our lives, but we ain't going to contribute anything. And that's what our culture is telling us we need to be doing. And that really bothers me. I don't want that. I could afford it. I could afford to pig out for the rest of my life and not even think about what's going on in the world. But I ain't doing that.
Yeah.
I wonder if I found myself trying to go through this chapter while I was in Nicaragua, and I found myself having to kind of pinch myself about, is this on the same planet?
Yeah.
Is this in the same reality zone? And I'm feeling like I'm wondering in some ways, listening to Marshall, whether this is kind of I don't know the right word for it. It's like a cul-de-sac that United States culture finds. I don't want to say we as a people find ourselves in that is not just co-equivalent to what's going on in other places in the world. This whole people living where like people live, and dealing with the elder and stuff like that. I found, anyway, I wonder. Well, should we dig, we want to dig more into memory, or should we, you want to step back and look at all 12 a bit?
Step back.
Step back.
So
Yeah,
let's,
I think it'd be good to go on to that myself.
Ruth is trying
Yeah.
to say something.
I'm sorry. I was picking up both on what Marshall and Jim just said, because there's a section in the chapter, just to stick here another minute, the sitting till bedtime. It's just a time and process that doesn't exist in our world. And it's the sitting till bedtime when people told stories, when wise elders would have access to sharing information, where multiple generations would be sitting around the fire. There's no, I don't see an equivalent for that. I don't, maybe Zoom a little bit, but anyway, for me, that was a question that was raised out of that chapter, was how and where do we recover sitting till bedtime?
It could, I think, to answer your question, I think it could happen at faith communities.
Mhm.
And those are places, a lot of them anyhow, are intergenerational. That could happen in those places, Christian and otherwise.
But look what's happening to faith communities. It's all, I mean, regardless of what faith they are, they're all going downhill as everybody's looking for a new story that will hold the big bucket. So yes, I agree with you. But anyway, I'm happy to go on. I just wanted to say, for me, that was a question that came out of that chapter.
Well, I'd like to say that, I gathered around my TV set last night. So and it was nice. Now, I just happened to spend a couple of hours learning quite a bit about Fannie Lou Hamer.
Yeah.
So the TV, that piece of technology has helped me to learn a story that, and not just her, but Ella Baker,
Mhm.
Dorothy Heights, a bunch of women who were leaders in the civil rights movement that I didn't know much about. I did not know their story, but my TV set taught me last night about who these women were. So I just want to say that, we make our own choices about how we hear the story and how we hear the stories all around us.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to stop us from creating our story, from forming our story effectively and communicating it. So I would say keep creating stories, keep making your own story, keep communicating it, keep pushing it forward, keep connecting with others around it.
Mhm.
Well, I just wanted to add what I did last night. In my living room, I had 3 guests. I wished I had more, but it was the last minute thing. And we had movie night. And I have a video projector and a huge screen and da 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 da. We had this 2-hour-long movie, and typically in my group, we've done this weekly. But the most important thing we have is a movie conversation.
Mhm.
Now, when have you ever heard of that? 4-level movie conversation that just deeply engages people in a conversation with the movie and about who they are and who we are as a small group and how we are related to the community and the world. And it was to sit there with these old friends. Some of them have been doing movie night with me for 15 years. Okay. To do that again and to be so, by the way, the food was great as well. It was potluck, and I made a big crock pot of black bean soup and we ate all of it. It was a great evening. And what I'm saying is everybody on this Zoom can do that.
We
You
do.
don't have, but that's better than sitting around a pot-bellied stove like my grandfather did and telling stories and spitting tobacco juice.
I'm not sure
Well
if that
said.
is the right word, but different. The
It's different. yeah.
we did a series with our kids on, there was a special on PBS about Asian Americans.
Mhm.
And so I think there were 4 parts to it. So we watched all the 4 parts. And everybody in my immediate family is Asian American except me. So we, but from different aspects. And so it was very, part of it was revealing was how much it didn't cover. Part of it was revealing of how much it did cover that I didn't know or we didn't know. But it was, we did one of these 4-level conversation things after each one of the things. And it was, but it was a great dialogue with our kids, Seva around just what that experience has been in their lives and what that experience has been in the lives of others. I'm
Mhm.
complete.